There is a moment in every American war when the president who started it has to face the question he spent years promising he would never have to answer. And that moment arrived today for Donald Trump, because the administration that sold itself to the American people on the most explicit anti-war platform in a generation, the campaign that put Tulsi Gabbard in front of audiences selling no war with Iran merchandise, the ticket that told young men of draft age they had nothing to fear, the president who said these globalists want to squander America's strength chasing monsters overseas, that same president sat in the Oval Office today and told reporters, "I don't have the yips" with respect to boots on the ground, and his own White House confirmed that thousands of troops are being considered for deployment into the country he promised would never see American soldiers. This is not a rumor. This is not opposition spin. This is Reuters, NBC News, Al Jazeera, Fortune, Military Times, Newsweek, and Bloomberg, all reporting simultaneously today, March 19th, that the Trump administration is actively weighing the deployment of thousands of U.S. troops to Iran and the surrounding region, that 2,500 Marines aboard 3 amphibious warships, including the USS Tripoli, are already heading to the Middle East, that CENTCOM has formally requested additional forces, and that the Pentagon has asked the White House for an additional $200 billion to fund a war that is now in its third week with no end date and no exit strategy. And before we go any deeper into exactly what is being considered, who is saying what, and why the young Americans who voted for this president based on his peace promises should be paying very close attention right now, stay with this video, because what we are about to walk through is the full picture that the White House does not want assembled in one place. So let us start at the beginning, because the promises matter, and the specificity of those promises is what makes today so significant. Trump did not simply suggest he preferred diplomacy over war. He built an entire political identity around the idea that the foreign policy establishment, the globalists as he called them, had dragged America into ruinous, endless wars in the Middle East that cost trillions of dollars and thousands of American lives and achieved nothing. And that he alone understood that this was a scam, a waste, a betrayal of the American working class by elites who did not have to send their own children to fight. In 2016, he called the Iraq War a big fat mistake and attacked the Bush family's legacy of Middle East intervention to win the Republican primary. In 2020, his entire foreign policy brand rested on bringing troops home from Afghanistan and Syria. In 2024, his campaign's closing argument to young male voters, the demographic that delivered him the margin of victory, was built around the fear of a new draft and a new war, and his team deliberately amplified that message in the final weeks of the campaign. Journalist Peter Hamby reported on CNN in late October 2024 that young men on college campuses were worried about global conflict because they are of draft age, and Trump's team saw that reporting and pushed it harder, leaning into the message that a vote for Trump was a vote against sending American sons to die in foreign wars. J.D. Vance wrote a Wall Street Journal column in 2023 arguing that Trump would not recklessly send Americans to fight in foreign wars. Tulsi Gabbard, who is now the director of national intelligence, sold "No War with Iran" shirts in 2020 and declared in 2024 that a vote for Donald Trump is a vote to end wars, not start them. Senator Lindsey Graham went on Meet the Press on the first day of Operation Epic Fury and said there will be no American boots on the ground. This is not Iraq. This is not Germany. This is not Japan. That was 3 weeks ago. Today, the administration is weighing exactly that. Now let's look at what is actually being considered, because the details are more alarming than the headline. According to Reuters, citing a U.S. official and 3 people familiar with the matter, the Trump administration is considering deploying thousands of U.S. troops to reinforce its operation in the Middle East as the military prepares for possible next steps in the campaign against Iran. Those options include securing safe passage for oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, which would rely primarily on air and naval forces, but could also require troops on the Iranian coastline that controls the northern entrance to the strait. The National Interest, citing military analysis, reports that CENTCOM has formally requested the deployment of thousands of Marines, and that the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, normally based in Okinawa, Japan, is already heading to the Middle East, carried by the USS Tripoli amphibious assault ship along with the USS San Diego and USS New Orleans. That task force consists of approximately 2,500 Marines and 20 F-35B Lightning II fighter jets, and its arrival in the region is not a coincidence or a rotation. It is a forward deployment that gives Trump options he does not currently have. The Bloomberg analysis published this week by defense analysts identified 3 specific targets that would require U.S. troops on the ground inside Iran. First, securing Iran's nuclear material, estimated at approximately 970 pounds of enriched uranium that could potentially be used to build nuclear weapons, and that is thought to still be buried under rubble, despite last summer's strikes that Trump had declared obliterated Iran's nuclear program. Second, capturing or controlling Kharg Island, the tiny oil hub 16 miles off the Iranian coast, through which 90% of Iran's crude oil exports pass. Third, establishing physical control of the Iranian coastline that commands the Strait of Hormuz. Each of those missions is real. Each of them has been discussed inside the administration, and each of them would require American soldiers to set foot on Iranian soil in a country of 90 million people that has been at war with the United States for 3 weeks, and whose foreign minister said publicly this week, and these are his exact words, "We are waiting for them because we are confident that we can confront them, and that would be a big disaster for them." Now drop a comment right now and tell me something. When you voted in 2024, did you believe the United States would be here? 3 weeks into a war with Iran, with 2,500 Marines steaming toward the Persian Gulf and a president weighing ground troops? Because I want to know what the people watching this video actually think about where this is going. The political situation inside Washington right now is as revealing as the military one, because the contradiction between what Republicans promised and what they are now being asked to approve is becoming impossible to ignore. When NBC News asked Republican senators this week whether they would want a war vote in Congress if Trump sends ground troops to Iran, the responses were extraordinary in their evasiveness. Senator James Risch of Idaho said that is incredibly speculative. I have no comment. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana said, "I'm not going to answer hypotheticals. I don't think the president is going to commit troops." Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa said, "I don't think we'll have to deploy conventional forces." Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota called the idea hypothetical at this point. These are the same senators who cheered when Trump launched Operation Epic Fury 3 weeks ago without a single vote in Congress, without a declaration of war, without an authorization for the use of military force, in what legal scholars at Yale, Harvard, and Georgetown have unanimously described as the most constitutionally questionable military action taken by any president since the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution in 1964. And the clock is ticking on the legal question, too, because the War Powers Resolution of 1973 sets a 60-day timer that automatically terminates the use of armed forces unless Congress declares war or votes to authorize the use of military force, which means that by the end of April, Trump either needs congressional authorization or he has to stop. And the administration has given every indication that stopping is not what it has in mind. Congressman Ted Lieu of California said publicly this week that he is a hard no on any additional funding for the Defense Department until Trump stops violating the Constitution and submits an authorization for the use of military force to Congress and the American people to consider, and he is not alone, with dozens of Democratic lawmakers and at least a handful of Republicans privately expressing concern about a war that began without their vote and is now asking for $200 billion additional dollars and potentially thousands of boots on the ground. That $200 billion figure deserves a moment because it is staggering, even by the standards of American military spending. The Washington Post reported this week that the Pentagon has asked the White House for $200 billion in supplemental funding for the Iran war, a figure that Fortune notes would fund the military for approximately 140 more days at current burn rates, which means even that enormous sum does not get the United States to the end of the year at the current pace of operations. The war has already cost 13 American lives. With about 200 more wounded, the U.S. has conducted more than 7,800 strikes since February 28th. It has damaged or destroyed more than 120 Iranian naval vessels. It has bombed Kharg Island. It has struck Iran's ballistic missile storage facilities, its drone manufacturing infrastructure, its naval bases, its air defenses, and still the Strait of Hormuz remains contested. Still no allied navy has committed a single warship to the coalition, despite Trump asking 7 countries and being refused by all 7, and still Iran's foreign minister is on camera saying we are waiting for them. Ryan Costello, policy director at the National Iranian American Council, a Washington think tank focused on U.S.-Iran relations, put the strategic trap the administration is in with surgical clarity. No country surrenders from air power alone, he said, and Trump has created a trap for himself. Either he backs down on his unattainable goal to dictate Iran, or he climbs up the escalation ladder, considering even more disastrous steps like boots on the ground. The Fortune analysis published today is even more direct. Its headline says Trump seems to have put himself in a position where the only Iran solution is troops on the ground, and the piece walks through the logic. Trump said his primary objective is ensuring Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. The air campaign has not secured the nuclear material. Securing the nuclear material requires physical presence on the ground. Physical presence on the ground means boots on the ground, and boots on the ground in Iran means something that no American president has attempted since the failed hostage rescue mission in 1980 that ended in disaster in the Iranian desert. Today, Thursday, March 19th, Trump sat in the Oval Office with Japan's Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi and told reporters, "No, I'm not putting troops anywhere," and then added the sentence that tells you everything about where this is actually heading. "If I were, I certainly wouldn't tell you." I certainly wouldn't tell you. That is the President of the United States telling the American people in plain English that he would deploy troops to Iran without informing them in advance, which is the same instinct that led him to launch Operation Epic Fury without a congressional vote, without public debate, without a legal authorization, and without consulting a single allied government before the first missiles flew. Vance said Trump would not recklessly send Americans to fight in foreign wars. Gabbard sold shirts saying no war with Iran. Graham said there will be no boots on the ground. Trump himself spent 8 years telling America that the globalists who start Middle East wars are the enemy of the American working class. Today, 2,500 Marines are heading to the Persian Gulf. The Pentagon wants $200 billion more. The administration is weighing ground troops. And the president said, if I were sending them, I certainly wouldn't tell you. If this video put together a picture that the mainstream coverage is giving you in pieces, but not assembling in one place, share it right now with someone who voted in 2024 based on what they were promised about war and peace, because the distance between that promise and this moment is the most important political story in America today, and the decisions being made in Washington this week will determine whether the young Americans who were told they had nothing to fear find out the hard way that they were wrong. Stay informed, stay tuned. We will be right here.